My name is Chloe Carter. I'm 28 years old, and my family has treated me like background noise for as long as I can remember. To them, I was the responsible one, the one who would be fine no matter what, which really meant they never had to pay attention to me. They saved all the attention, all the praise, all the "we're so proud of you" speeches for my older brother and his big, shiny life. I got the occasional "that's nice, honey" tossed over a shoulder while they refreshed the group chat to see his latest win. This Christmas was supposed to be about him again. My mom called it a little celebration for your brother's big promotion, like I was just extra seating at his party. They had no idea that a few weeks earlier I'd wired more money into my bank account than my entire family had seen in their lives combined. No idea that my little side project, the one they rolled their eyes at, the one they called a distraction from a real career, had turned into a company someone paid $170 million for. I sat at that table, staring at the carved ham and the mismatched holiday plates, listening to them hype him up like always, feeling that old familiar burn in my chest. Then my brother made one snide comment too many about my tiny nurse paycheck and my cute little business. I looked him dead in the eye and said, as casually as I could, "I sold my company." He smirked and asked, "Your little worthless business? For how much?" I said, $170 million. His jaw actually dropped. My mom went pale. My dad's fork slipped out of his hand and clattered against the plate. What happened after that changed our family forever, and not in the warm, fuzzy Christmas movie way they like to pretend we are. Before I tell you what my brother said next, and what I did after I walked away from that table, do me a favor. Drop a comment with what time it is for you right now and where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these messy family stories can travel. Growing up as Chloe Carter meant learning early that love in my house came with a ranking system, and I was never in first place. I was the kid who brought home science fair ribbons and straight A's in biology. My older brother was the one who scored winning touchdowns and got his name announced over the loudspeaker. Guess which one my parents framed on the wall? They called me low maintenance, like it was a compliment. "Chloe doesn't need all that fuss," my mom would say, adjusting my brother's tie for the third time before his award ceremonies. When I got into a competitive nursing program on a scholarship, my dad said, "That's great, honey. Nurses are helpful." Then immediately turned to ask my brother, Ryan, how his business major was going, like my life was a warm-up act for the real show. The irony is, being ignored made me dangerous. While they were glued to Ryan's highlight reel, I was learning how to read EKGs, start IVs, and think clearly while someone was coding in front of me. I took a job as a night shift ER nurse straight out of school, and what nobody in my family understood was how much chaos I handled every single night. We stabilized car crash victims, stroke patients, overdose cases. I made calls at 3 a.m. that meant the difference between someone waking up or never waking up again. And in the pockets of time between codes and charting, when other nurses scrolled their phones, I sketched out an idea on the back of scrap paper. I kept seeing the same problems over and over: chaotic staffing, missed handoffs, dangerous delays because no one had a clear picture of who was where and what was happening. So, with the help of a programmer friend from school, Maya Lopez, I started building a platform we called PulseLink, a real-time coordination system for emergency departments. At first, it was just a rough prototype. I'd drag myself home at 7 a.m., shower, crash for a few hours, then wake up, chug coffee, and hop on calls with Maya. We'd debug issues while my neighbors were making dinner, then I'd head back to the hospital for another 12-hour shift. My family knew exactly 1% of this. To them, I was still working nights, which translated in my mom's head to still not doing anything worth posting on Facebook. But they knew every single detail of Ryan's life. He became an investment analyst, then a future partner at his firm, then the proud owner of a condo our parents helped him pay for. They cashed out part of their retirement to help with his down payment and called it supporting his future. When I asked if they could co-sign a small line of credit so Maya and I could quit our second jobs and focus on PulseLink, my dad laughed and said, "Sweetheart, apps are a fad. Be realistic. Nursing is your backup plan, remember? Don't risk that on some tech fantasy." Funny how my steady, life-saving job was a backup plan when it came to me, but Ryan's spreadsheets were visionary. The night everything changed, I was on break in the staff lounge, half asleep on a plastic chair with my phone face down on my lap. When I finally checked it, I had 3 missed calls from an unknown number and one from Maya, plus a text in all caps. "Answer your phone, we got it." I stepped into the supply closet, heart pounding, and called her back. She was crying and laughing at the same time. The hospital board we'd been pitching to for months had finally agreed to roll out PulseLink as a pilot, and a medical software company we'd been talking to in San Francisco wanted to acquire us outright. The number they mentioned made my knees buckle. It didn't feel real. I finished my shift in a daze, then spent the next week juggling contract calls, NDAs, and lawyers in between triaging patients. While my parents sent me a flyer for Ryan's promotion party at the firm, literally a digital invitation in the family group chat with a champagne emoji, and the words, "So proud of you, Ryan," I was in a glass conference room downtown, signing away a company I had built on energy drinks and pure stubbornness. When the wire finally hit, $170 million, minus legal fees and taxes and the investor slice, there was still more money left than I knew what to do with. I stared at my banking app like it might glitch and disappear. I cried in my car, then went to work that night like nothing had happened, because people still needed their vitals checked and meds passed. I didn't tell my parents. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I knew exactly what would happen if I did. They'd minimize it, misunderstand it, or turn it into a story about how they always knew I'd do great things, even though they had never asked a single real question. When my mom called a week before Christmas and said, "We're doing a special dinner this year for your brother's promotion. You can make it, right?" I almost laughed. She didn't say, "for the family" or "for the holidays." She said, "for your brother." And that's when the idea really solidified. I wasn't going to show up in designer clothes or drop hints like I was begging for attention. I was going to sit at that table, listen to them talk about him like he walked on water. And when he made one of his usual jabs at my little nurse life, I'd drop the number that would split their reality open. Not to be petty. Okay, maybe a little petty? But mostly because I was tired of being erased in my own family's story. Christmas Day, I parked my same old beat-up Honda at the curb in front of my parents' house, and that alone helped my plan. No flashy car, no luxury handbag, nothing that screamed multimillionaire. Just me in black jeans, a soft green sweater, and the same winter coat I'd had since nursing school. The house looked exactly the same as every other holiday, lights tangled along the gutters, a plastic reindeer leaning slightly to one side, wreath on the door with a faded red bow. Inside, I could already hear my mother's laugh over the music and my dad's deep voice booming about something. I pressed my thumb against the cool metal of the doorknob and forced myself to inhale slowly. This wasn't just about money. This was about walking into the same battlefield I'd grown up on, and refusing to play the same role. "Chloe, finally!" My mom, Linda, swooped in first, smelling like cinnamon and perfume. She gave me a quick hug, then pulled back to smooth my hair, like I was 8. "You look tired. Are you still doing those crazy night shifts? I keep telling you, honey, you should find something calmer. You don't want to burn out before you're 30. "Good to see you too, Mom," I said, stepping out of my boots. "Yeah, still nights. Somebody's got to keep people alive while you're sleeping." She tutted like I'd made a dramatic joke and turned away before I even finished speaking. Your brother's already here, she called over her shoulder. He brought that artisanal wine. So thoughtful. We're going to open it with dinner. I followed her into the living room and, sure enough, there was Ryan Carter, standing in the middle of it like he owned the place. Perfect hair, expensive watch, slim fit dress shirt rolled at the sleeves. He was mid-story, some tale about his boss pulling him aside in the hallway to talk about big future plans. My dad, Paul, sat in his recliner, hanging on every word. Chloe. Ryan finally noticed me and grinned, walking over with his glass in hand. You made it. I know nights can be rough. Did they finally let you out of the hospital dungeon? We don't actually chain patients to the walls anymore, but yeah, they did, I said dryly. He laughed like he thought he was charming. How's what was it, data thing you were messing around with? That app? It's been busy, I said, keeping my face neutral. We've had a lot going on. Well, don't let it distract you from your real work, my dad chimed in, gesturing vaguely. Nursing is a solid job. Practical. And you've always been our practical kid, right? The one we don't have to worry about. Ryan's got a lot riding on him with that firm. Yeah, Ryan added, clinking his glass lightly against Dad's. High stakes. Big dollars. They literally said the words, future partner, in front of the whole team. My mom clasped her hands at her chest. We're just so proud of you, sweetheart. Tonight is all about celebrating you. I stood there, invisible, the way I'd been my entire life. There it was again. We don't have to worry about you. It sounded nice, but what it really meant was, we don't think about you. I moved into the kitchen to help, not because I felt like it, but because it gave my hands something to do other than shake. As I chopped vegetables and stirred sauces, the familiar rhythm of holiday cooking worked like a metronome to calm me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Maya. Maya, you okay? Maya, remember, they don't decide your value. You do. I smiled despite myself and typed back. Showtime soon. When we finally sat at the dining table, the seating arrangement said everything. Ryan smack in the middle on one side, flanked by my parents like he was the guest of honor at some gala. They'd put me at the far end near the sideboard, an easy reach for passing dishes and taking plates to the sink, a built-in waitress, classic. As they started pouring wine, my dad lifted his glass. To Ryan, he said, eyes shining. To his promotion, his hard work, and everything he's going to accomplish. We couldn't be prouder. To Ryan, my mom echoed. Our star. I raised my glass too, partly because it would have been weird not to, partly because I wanted them lulled into their usual script. Ryan smirked at me as he took a sip, a small smug lift of his mouth that said he knew exactly where he sat in the family food chain. So Chloe, he said, leaning back like a talk show host tossing a bone to a guest, still pulling double shifts and eating stale vending machine snacks? You gotta get out of that grind, little sis. Maybe someday I'll get you an interview at my firm. He said it half joking, but there was a real condescension under it, the same tone he'd used when he once told me, if that app of yours ever makes a buck, I'll buy you something nice, like a real purse. My chest tightened, but this time, instead of swallowing it, I let the feeling sharpen me. I glanced at the ham, the mashed potatoes, the flickering candle in the center of the table. I thought about every time they'd brushed past me to get to him, every time they'd turned my milestones into footnotes to his achievements, and I decided I was done. I didn't blurt it out in anger. That would have been too easy for them to dismiss as Chloe being emotional. I waited. I let them run through their usual loops, Ryan's promotion, the important people at his firm, the huge clients, whose names they dropped even though they barely understood what he did. I added little neutral comments, the kind nurses use when we're assessing a patient. "Oh, wow!" and "That's big!" and "How are you feeling about that?" All while my mind was quietly counting off beats, like a conductor waiting to cue the orchestra. The opening came when my mom turned to me with the polite interest people reserve for small talk. "So, honey, what about you?" she asked, topping off Ryan's glass before mine. "Same hospital? Same, what do you call it, ward?" "ER," I said. "Same ER. But a lot has changed this year." My dad gave a vague nod. "Well, as long as you're stable, that's what matters. God knows the world needs good nurses." My brother snorted softly. "Yeah, and she's got that little app thing, remember? The one she keeps experimenting with." He even did air quotes. "How's that going? Still asking the universe to manifest $1 million?" The table chuckled. It hurt, but it also helped. They were serving me the moment on a silver platter. I set my fork down gently so the sound wouldn't distract from what I was about to say. "Actually," I replied, keeping my voice almost bored, "I'm not manifesting $1 million anymore." Ryan cocked his head. "Oh? You give up on your little fantasy?" "No," I said, meeting his eyes. "I sold my company." The words landed like a glass shattering on tile. The room didn't go silent all at once. It was more like the laughter died in stages, like people realized simultaneously that this wasn't a joke. My mom's smile froze. My dad blinked twice. Ryan frowned like he'd misheard me. "You... what?" he said. "I sold my company," I repeated. "PulseLink? The ER coordination platform I've been building the last few years. We closed the deal 3 weeks ago." His frown turned into a smirk, relieved. Okay, Miss CEO. And how much did your little worthless business go for?" The word worthless had history. He'd thrown it at me in a fight last Thanksgiving when I'd told him I didn't have extra cash to help with a second investment he wanted to make. "You're a nurse, Chloe. You make okay money, but you're not exactly swimming in it. That app is worthless until proven otherwise." I'd let it slide then. Not this time. I took a sip of water, kept my hand steady, and said, 170 million. Ryan laughed, too loud. "Get out of here." "She's joking," my mom said quickly, like she needed to reassert control of the narrative. "That's not funny, Chloe. Money talk is tacky." "I'm not joking," I replied. $170 million. A healthcare software company in San Francisco acquired PulseLink. We signed at the beginning of the month. I've got a multi-year consulting role and equity in their parent company. After taxes and investor payouts, I'm fine. I watched the color drain from my mom's face like someone had pulled a plug. My dad's jaw slackened. He looked at me the way patients look at a monitor when the numbers don't match how they feel. Confused, disoriented. Ryan's laughter sputtered out. "You're lying," he said. You don't just sell things for that much money. You still drive that crap car. You still live in that apartment with the squeaky steps. If you had that kind of money, we'd know." "Why?" I asked, tilting my head. "You've never asked about my work before. You barely listen when I talk about my patients, let alone my company. You assumed you knew my whole life because you knew my job title. You know the hours I work, but you don't know what I've built with them." My mom clutched her napkin. "Chloe, sweetheart, if this is some kind of joke to ruin your brother's celebration..." "I'm not trying to ruin anything," I cut in, my patience thinning. "I'm sharing my news at a family dinner. That's what this is, right? Family?" My dad cleared his throat, grasping for something solid. "If this is true," he said slowly, "why didn't you tell us? Why wouldn't you come to us first?" That one actually made me laugh. A short, bitter sound. "Come to you first? Like when I asked you to co-sign a tiny line of credit and you told me to be realistic? Like when I tried to explain what PulseLink did and you said you didn't understand that tech stuff and changed the subject back to Ryan's quarterly bonus. The room went still. Ryan's eyes flicked between my parents and me, something like panic starting to flicker in them. He was used to being the main character here. Suddenly, he wasn't. Okay, he said, forcing a chuckle. Let's say this is real. Show us. Show me your account. Show me. Something. He sounded almost frantic. Normally, I'd hate the idea of pulling out my phone and proving my worth with numbers, but in this moment I knew exactly what I was doing. I opened my banking app under the table, pulled up one of the accounts, and set the phone face up between us. I didn't show all of it, just enough. Enough zeros to make my dad suck in a breath and my mom's hand fly to her mouth. Enough for Ryan's eyes to widen, then narrow, like he was trying to do complicated math in his head. Math that ended with one conclusion. He wasn't the most successful child anymore. Holy, Ryan muttered, cutting himself off only because our mom gave him the look she reserves for bad language and spilled gravy. He stared at the screen like he could will the numbers to change. This doesn't make sense. You? How? That one little word said everything. You. The girl they didn't have to worry about. The nurse who worked nights and wore sensible shoes. The sibling who sat quietly and clapped on command while they toasted Ryan's every move. It's not that complicated, I said. I saw a problem at work. I built something to fix it, and people in positions of power saw the value. They paid accordingly. But you never said anything, my mom whispered. Not a word. We're your parents. We should have known. Should you? I asked. Because every time I tried to talk about PulseLink, you talked over me. I'd try to explain and you'd say, "That's nice, honey." Then ask Ryan how his big meeting went. You knew every detail of his job, but you can't even tell me the name of the hospital where I work without thinking for a second. My dad bristled. Now hold on. We've supported you. We've always been proud of you. I leaned forward, the years of swallowed words finally clawing their way out. You supported Ryan. You dipped into your retirement to help with his condo. You co-signed on his first car. When he tanked that can't-miss investment 2 years ago, you called it a learning experience. When I asked for a fraction of that support, you told me I was being reckless. Ryan's face flushed. That's not fair, he snapped. They knew I had real prospects. You were just playing with code on your laptop. You mean the code you laughed at when I showed you the early dashboard? I asked. The one you said looked like a school project before you took a photo and sent it to your friends as a joke? He opened his mouth, then shut it. The memory clearly hit. Our mom looked back and forth between us, shaken. We didn't know, she murmured. We had no idea it was serious. Why didn't you push harder? Make us listen. There it was. The blame turned back on me. Classic. Because I was tired, I said quietly. Tired of begging my own parents to treat me like more than an accessory to Ryan's success story. Tired of explaining my life to people who'd already decided who I was. The room felt tight, the air hot despite the snow outside. My dad set his fork down, forgotten. So what now? He asked, his voice oddly small. You're rich. You don't need us. I've never needed you for money, I said. I needed you to care. I needed you to look at me and see more than someone who would be fine no matter what. Ryan suddenly pushed back his chair, the legs scraping harshly on the floor. So what? You came here to flex, he demanded. To humiliate me? To make them feel guilty? You couldn't just tell us like a normal person you had to do it at my celebration dinner? You mean the Christmas dinner my parents renamed for your promotion? I shot back. The one they introduced to me as your brother's big night? If this is really just about family and not about worshiping you, why does my success feel like an attack? He glared at me, jaw clenched. "You always played the victim," he said. "You never asked for more. You never said you wanted the spotlight." "I didn't want the spotlight," I answered. "I wanted room to exist. There's a difference." Another heavy silence fell. I could tell my parents were trying to catch up, mentally rewriting years of family history on the fly. That was their problem, not mine. I wasn't here to babysit their guilt. I was here to finally, fully, step out of the box they'd shoved me into. I took my phone back and locked it. "I didn't come here to beg for validation," I said, pushing my chair back. "I came here to tell you who I am now. Whether you can handle that is up to you." As I stood, my mom reached for my wrist. "Chloe, wait," she pleaded. We just need time. This is a lot." "I've given you 28 years," I replied. "Time isn't the issue." I walked away from that table, past the tree and the stockings with our names on them, past the family photos lining the hall, most of them featuring Ryan front and center, me blurred at the edges. In the hallway mirror, I caught a glimpse of myself. Calm, not shattered. It surprised me. I wasn't the desperate girl I'd been at 16, waiting for her parents to look up from the bleachers and notice her too. I was a woman who had built something world-changing while they weren't looking. Whether they ever caught up was no longer life or death for me. I didn't get far before the storm hit. "Chloe!" Ryan's voice followed me down the hallway, sharp and raw in a way I wasn't used to hearing. I turned just as he caught up. His usual polished composure cracked. "You can't just drop a bomb like that and walk out." "Watch me," I said. "I've spent my whole life swallowing things so you didn't feel threatened." "Threatened?" He barked out a laugh that had no humor in it. "You think I'm threatened by you?" "You are now," I said. We stared at each other, the years of unspoken competition suddenly very, very spoken. My parents hovered a few feet behind him, not quite close enough to intervene, not quite distant enough to pretend they weren't involved. "You don't understand what you've done," Ryan said, shifting tactics. "You made me look like an idiot back there. You know my boss is friends with Dad on Facebook. What happens when this gets out? When people hear my little sister built a company worth that much and I didn't even know? I look like a joke." There it was. Not concern for me, not curiosity about my work. Just panic about his image. "Your biggest fear is looking stupid," I said. "My biggest fear used to be dying in a hallway because nobody listened when I said I wasn't okay. That's the difference between us." My dad bristled. "Now that's uncalled for. We've always cared about you." "You cared about the version of me that didn't make you uncomfortable," I replied. "The quiet nurse, the helper, the good listener. You had a script for her. You don't have a script for this version." My mom stepped closer, wringing her hands. "We're trying to understand. We're trying to be happy for you. But it hurts, Chloe. It hurts that you didn't trust us with this, that you shut us out." I swallowed, choosing my next words carefully. "You weren't shut out. You walked out. Every time you interrupted me to ask Ryan another question, every time you forgot my schedule but memorized his, every time you told me to be happy for your brother when I was hurting. You think being ignored doesn't leave scars?" Ryan scoffed. "This is ridiculous. You're acting like you were abused or something. You had a roof over your head, food, a good school. You had every advantage." "Except being seen," I said quietly. "Except being chosen." The hallway felt too small, the walls too close. For a second, I considered softening, taking it back, making a joke to ease the tension. That old reflex was strong. But then I remembered all the nights I spent collapsing into bed, eyes burning from staring at a screen after 12 hours on my feet, building something no one in this house believed in. That girl deserved better than me backing down now. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, surprising even myself with how steady I sounded. I'm going to leave. You're going to sit with this. Maybe you're going to get angry and complain to each other about how ungrateful I am. Maybe you're going to feel guilty. Maybe you're going to try to pretend nothing happened. That's your call. But from now on, if you want access to my life, not my money, my life, it will be on different terms. My dad frowned. What terms? You stop comparing me to Ryan, I said. You stop treating my accomplishments like accidents. You stop asking me for favors you would never expect from him. And you apologize, not just for tonight, for the last 20 years. Ryan threw his hands up. Apologize? For what? Being successful? No, I answered. For stepping on me to feel taller. For laughing at my work when you didn't understand it. For using me as proof that you were the special one. He flinched at that, just slightly. You don't know what it's like to be under pressure all the time, he muttered. To have everyone counting on you to make it. You're right, I said. I don't know what it's like to have people believe in me before I prove anything. I only know what it's like to patch people up all night and then pour my last brain cells into building something while the people who were supposed to love me most called it a gamble. We didn't have the same childhood, even though we grew up in the same house. For a moment, no one spoke. Then my mom did something I honestly didn't expect. She started crying. Not the performative tears she'd sometimes use to shut down conflict, but the messy kind. The kind that made her reach for the wall like she needed support. We did this, she said to my dad, voice cracking. We made them like this. Pitted them against each other without even noticing. I thought we were just encouraging him because he needed it. I thought she was fine. My dad's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. We were wrong, he said quietly. We were wrong, and we can't undo it. Ryan looked between them, then at me, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Fear. Not of me, but of losing this version of his life where he was always the chosen one. So what? He asked hoarsely. You cut us off? You disappear into your rich people world and forget we exist? I shook my head. No, I said. I build a world where I exist, whether you see me or not. You can be part of it if you're willing to do the work. If not, I'll be okay. For the first time, I truly know that. I grabbed my coat from the hook by the door. My mom reached for me and then stopped, like she knew empty promises wouldn't work this time. We'll call you, she said weakly, when we've thought about what to say. Take your time, I replied. Just don't call me to ask for money. Ryan's cheeks reddened. You already hinted, I cut in. You asked how this would look for you at work. You're scared your boss will find out your baby sister is more successful than you on paper. Newsflash, that's not my problem. You have your own path to walk. I stepped outside into the icy air, the cold biting but clean. Behind me, the muffled sounds of my family arguing rose and fell. It hurt. Of course it hurt. But under the hurt, there was something else blooming. A strange, fierce peace. For once, I hadn't folded myself into a smaller shape to fit their expectations. I walked to my car feeling like my spine was made of steel. In the weeks after Christmas, my family did exactly what I expected. They went quiet. No group chats, no Happy New Year text, no memes from my mom. At first, the silence felt like standing in a room after a fire, smelling smoke and not sure what was still standing. I threw myself into my new reality instead. There were meetings with the acquiring company, strategy sessions about how PulseLink would scale, visits to other hospitals where nurses lit up when they saw how much easier their workflow became. For the first time, my daily conversations were with people who saw my brain first, not my role in a family hierarchy. I also did something that would have terrified the old me. I booked therapy. Not because I was broken, but because I was tired of dragging old wounds into new rooms. A lot of those sessions were about my parents, about how being the ignored kid can feel easier than being the problem kid, but it still eats you alive slowly, about how favoritism isn't just unfair, it's a form of emotional neglect for everyone involved. My therapist said something that stuck with me. When a family chooses a golden child, they don't just hurt the scapegoat or the invisible kid, they also set the golden child up to crash when the world doesn't treat them the same way. I didn't fully understand what she meant until the second week of January, when Ryan called. I stared at his name flashing on my phone for a long moment before answering. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Hey," he replied. He sounded smaller. "Can you talk?" "A little," I said. "What's up?" There was a pause, then a bitter laugh. "You know how I said your little show at dinner would make me look stupid at work?" "I remember," I said. "You were very concerned about that." "Yeah, well," he said. "Turns out I did a pretty good job of that all by myself." He explained haltingly that he'd been riding high on his promotion, the one my parents had basically thrown a holiday in honor of, and had gotten sloppy. He'd used client names in a bar where he shouldn't have. He'd sent an email with the wrong attachment. He'd made a few bad calls trying to impress a senior partner. Nothing illegal, but enough to make the higher-ups nervous. "They said I've gotten distracted," he finished, "that my performance isn't matching my attitude. They're reevaluating my trajectory." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. Not because I felt guilty, I didn't, but because watching someone's identity crumble is painful, even when that identity was built on a shaky foundation. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because," he said, exhaling hard, "for the first time I get it. A tiny bit anyway. What it feels like when your whole worth is tied to what people think you will become instead of who you actually are. And when that starts to slip, you don't know who you are without it." I sat down on my couch, the weight of his words settling around me. "You could have figured that out without trampling me," I said gently. "But I'm glad you're seeing it now." "Mom keeps saying we should apologize," he blurted. "Dad says he doesn't know where to start. They're messed up about this, Chloe. About you. About them. About everything." "They don't need a perfect speech," I said. "They just need to tell the truth, even if it's ugly." A week later, they did. My parents invited me to meet at a cafe halfway between my place and theirs. They showed up looking 10 years older than I remembered, not from my success, but from finally seeing their own patterns. My mom cried again, but this time she didn't try to make it the whole story. My dad admitted, eyes wet, that he'd been scared of me surpassing him in ways he didn't understand, so it was easier to joke about Ryan's career. They both said the words I hadn't let myself hope for. "We are sorry. We were wrong. We can't undo the years we made you feel like backup. We want to do better, if you'll let us." I didn't melt into their arms. I didn't fix it with one hug. I told them honestly, "I appreciate this. I also need time. I don't trust words yet. I need to see what you do." And then I set boundaries. I told them I wasn't their retirement plan. I told them I wouldn't be bailing Ryan out of any bad investments or paying off their house just because I could. I told them if they talked down my nursing career or treated my work like a fluke again, I would leave. They listened, really listened, and over the next year, slowly, painfully, they started to change. They asked me questions about my work and didn't pivot back to Ryan after 30 seconds. They respected when I said I was tired from a shift and couldn't talk. They started catching themselves when they slipped into old patterns. My mom would stop mid-sentence and say, "I'm doing it again, aren't I?" And then correct herself. As for Ryan, he didn't get fired, but his path at the firm leveled out. No more fast track. No more constant praise. He hated it at first. Then he started to separate who he was from what he did. He apologized to me, really apologized, not with excuses or joking deflections. And one day, months after that Christmas, he asked me something that surprised me more than anything else in this whole story. "Do you think," he said, "you'd ever let me intern or work at something you build? Not as your brother? Just as some guy starting over?" I thought about it for a long second. "Maybe," I said, "if you're okay with starting at the bottom and being taught by people who aren't impressed by your last name." He laughed, but there was humility in it this time. "Fair." Here's what I learned from all of this, and what I'd want anyone watching to take away. Family favoritism isn't just unfair, it's a slow kind of harm. It tells one kid they're never enough, and another that they're only enough when they're shining. It makes the ignored child doubt their worth, and the golden child terrified of falling. Standing up for yourself in that system isn't selfish, it's survival. Setting boundaries with your parents isn't disrespectful. Sometimes it's the only way to break a pattern that would otherwise pass down to the next generation. And your value does not start when your family finally sees it. It has been there the whole time. My parents ignoring me for years didn't erase my worth. It just delayed the moment they had to face it. Our team at Revenge Red is dedicated to crafting meaningful, emotionally rich stories that resonate with real-life struggles. We promise that these are fictional stories, created purely to share valuable lessons and positive, educational messages with our viewers. This script highlights the educational value of self-worth, emotional boundaries, and the long-term impact of family favoritism. It encourages viewers to reflect on mental health, healthy communication, and the importance of recognizing every person's potential. Through this story, we hope people learn to build more respectful, understanding, and supportive relationships in their own lives. My name is Lauren, I'm 29, and 2 days before I blew up my entire family's illusion, my own mother looked me dead in the eye and called me broke. She said it loud enough for the whole table to hear, like it was a punchline, not her daughter's life. My brother leaned back in his chair, smirked, and added, "You'll always be a nobody. Some people just aren't built for real success, I guess." Everyone laughed. Plates clinked, glasses tapped, and there I was, apparently the joke, sitting across from people who didn't know the only reason their lights were on was because of the nobody they liked to mock. They didn't know the mortgage company emailed me, not them. They didn't know both car notes drafted from my account. They didn't know the credit cards in their names were actually tied to my income, my overtime, my sleepless shifts. "You should really learn how to manage your money, Lauren," my mom said, shaking her head like I was a child who lost her lunch money. I wanted to laugh. Manage my money? I had spreadsheets, auto-pay setups, and entire paychecks disappearing so they could post vacation photos and talk about working hard for what you have. I could have exposed everything right there, in front of the mashed potatoes and fake concern. Instead, I smiled, took a sip of water, and let them talk. Let them dig in. Let them underestimate me one more time. Because they had no idea that in 48 hours, I would send one email that would cancel their safety net, expose every lie, and force them to finally stand on their own 2 feet, or fall. Before I tell you what happened after that email, tell me in the comments, what time is it where you are right now, and which city or country are you watching from? I want to see how far this broke nobody story can travel. The morning after that dinner, I was back in my tiny one-bedroom apartment, hundreds of miles away from their 3-bedroom dream house that I paid for. I threw my scrubs into the laundry basket, kicked off my shoes, and sank onto the couch. My body still ached from the 12-hour night shift in the ER, but it wasn't the physical exhaustion that broke me. It was replaying my mom's voice calling me broke while she sat in a kitchen I technically owned. I work as a trauma nurse in Houston. I pick up double shifts, holidays, weekends, whatever the hospital needs. I see people on the worst days of their lives, and then I go home and quietly keep my family afloat like it's just another part of the job. It started 3 years ago after my dad's second heart scare. My mom called crying, saying they were behind on the mortgage, that they might lose the house, that it would kill my dad to move. I had just finished paying off my last credit card and promised myself I'd finally save for my own home. Instead, I let guilt win. I called the bank, refinanced the loan under my name with my income, and took over every payment just until they got back on their feet. They never did. They just got comfortable. After that came the car notes. We just need something reliable to get to work. And the credit cards. We'll pay you back as soon as we can. They never did that either. On paper, I looked irresponsible. A single woman with massive debt and no assets of her own. In reality, I was a one-woman bailout fund for people who bragged about how hard they worked for everything. Last night's comments were different, though. They weren't just ungrateful. They were cruel. And for the first time, instead of swallowing it, I felt something inside me click. Not rage. The rage had been there for a while. It was clarity. If I kept paying, nothing would change. Why would it? They got the lifestyle and the moral high ground. I got anxiety and broke jokes. I pulled my laptop onto my knees and opened my online banking. Line after line of auto payments to their life scrolled across the screen. Mortgage, insurance, utilities, student loans that weren't even mine. If your family mocked you for being broke while living off your overtime, would you still keep paying? I stared at the numbers and realized the truth. The only reason they could afford to look down on me was me. That's when the idea of that email stopped being a fantasy and became a plan. I didn't start with words. I started with receipts. Before I even opened a blank email, I opened my banking app and pulled up 3 years of statements, scrolling past endless lines of mortgage draft, auto finance, utility services, and credit card payments that never once had my name on the plastic, only on the responsibility. I exported everything into a spreadsheet, sat at my small kitchen table, and began building the story my family pretended didn't exist. Column A, date. Column B, company. Column C, amount. Column D, which family member benefited. The screen filled up fast, rows stacking on rows until I had to scroll just to see the beginning again. I added a final column, what I gave up that month. Rent raised at my place, but I still covered their car. Skipped a weekend trip with coworkers so my mom's credit card wouldn't max out. Took on an extra overnight shift instead of rest so the mortgage didn't bounce. By the time I typed the last entry, my eyes were burning and my neck ached, but seeing everything laid out like that stripped away any excuse I'd let them feed me. This wasn't helping out a little. This was a second household on the back of one exhausted nurse. At the bottom of the sheet, I hit AutoSum. The total number that popped up made my breath catch. I whispered it out loud just to hear it. That amount could have been a down payment on my own condo. It could have been 6 months' emergency savings. It could have been the difference between grinding every weekend until my body broke and finally breathing. Instead, it was the price of keeping my parents in their fantasy that they were doing fine. I closed my eyes and flashed back to the first time my mom called about the house. Her voice had cracked through the speaker, shaky and wet with tears. "Lauren, baby, they're saying if we miss one more payment, they'll start foreclosure. I don't know what to do. Your father can't handle moving again. This house is all we have." I'd been standing in my old studio apartment then, surrounded by cheap furniture and secondhand kitchenware, looking at my own bank account and realizing I could barely cover my own bills, let alone theirs. But when she said, "If we lose the house, it will kill him," I caved. I told myself it would be temporary. 3 months tops. I refinanced, signed where they asked me to sign, took on the responsibility because you're young. You have time to recover. 3 months became 6. 6 became a year. A year became 3. And somewhere along the way, my mother went from sobbing about foreclosure to casually boasting about our house at family gatherings, conveniently skipping the part where her daughter was the one keeping it. That memory hardened something inside me. So when I opened my laptop and clicked into my work portal to schedule a call with the hospital's financial wellness counselor, I wasn't shaky anymore. I picked the earliest slot the next day and wrote in the notes, "Long-term family support, need exit plan that protects my credit." The counselor, a woman with a calm voice named Melissa, didn't sound shocked when I explained everything. "You'd be surprised how often this happens," she said. "Adult children taking on parental debt, especially when there's guilt involved. You are not a bad daughter for wanting out." She walked me through the practical steps in a way that made the whole mess feel less like a moral failure and more like a problem to solve. Turn off auto payments in a staggered way so due dates don't blindside my own accounts. Notify the creditors that correspondence should go only to the primary account holders. Put everything I'm changing in writing and give a clear end date to avoid being dragged into "I didn't know" and "you didn't tell us." "And emotionally?" I asked, my voice smaller. "Emotionally," she said, "you need to accept that they will call you selfish, ungrateful, cruel. People who benefit from your lack of boundaries rarely applaud when you set them. But at some point, you have to decide if you're going to live as their hero or as your own human being." After the call, I didn't even take my coat off. I sat right back down at the table and opened a blank email. Subject line, "Financial support ending. Please read carefully." My fingers hovered over the keys, then started to fly. I wrote it like a report, not a cry for attention. "For the past 3 years, I have been financially supporting the household in the following ways," I began, then attached my spreadsheet. I listed the mortgage, the 2 car notes, the utilities, the credit card payments, the personal loan bailouts. For each, I included the monthly amount, the approximate total paid, and the date the automatic payment would end. Effective, exact date. "I will no longer be responsible for these obligations," I wrote. "The accounts are in your names. You will need to contact the companies directly to arrange your own payment plans." I added screenshots of key documents. The refinance agreement with my name as the borrower of record and my parents as occupants. The loan disclosures for the cars. The credit card statements addressed to my mom but paid from my account. Evidence, not emotion. I thought I'd stop there, but if I did, it would just look like a cold ledger. So I added the part they couldn't call a misunderstanding. I took on these responsibilities out of love and fear. Fear of losing Dad, fear of watching you lose the house, fear of being the bad daughter who said no. I never asked for public credit because I assumed private respect would be enough. Hearing myself called broke and a nobody while funding your mortgage and cars makes it clear that respect is not part of this arrangement. I reread that line 3 times. My heart pounded, but it felt honest. Then came the boundary. "I will not continue to sacrifice my financial future, my physical health, and my mental well-being to maintain a lifestyle you present as your own hard work. I will also not tolerate being shamed or guilt-tripped for choosing to stop." I knew them. I knew there would be retaliation, so I made that explicit too. Any attempts to manipulate me, to triangulate other family members against me, or to publicly misrepresent this situation will be met with the same thing I am sharing here: facts, documents, and the truth. I debated whether to include extended family in the email. Part of me hated airing anything outside the inner circle. Another part of me knew exactly how this would go if I didn't. My mom crying to my aunt that I abandoned them. My brother painting me as an unstable drama queen. In the end, I left the "to" field blank and closed the draft. Not because I changed my mind, but because I knew I had just written the match. I wanted to make sure I was strong enough to strike it. I hit save draft, shut the laptop, and finally exhaled. No explosion yet, just the eerie quiet right before the storm when you realize you're the one about to call in the lightning. The next day, after another grueling shift, I sat in the hospital break room with my cooling coffee and my finger hovering over the send button on my phone. My hands were trembling, but not from lack of sleep this time. From knowing that once I tapped that screen, I could never unsend the truth. I read the email one more time, added my mom's address, my brother's, and, deliberately, 3 more. My aunt, my uncle, and my cousin Chloe. The people my mom loved to complain to about her ungrateful daughter would finally see the full picture. I took a breath, exhaled slowly, and tapped send. No confetti, no dramatic thunder, just a whoosh sound, and then silence. For about 3 hours. Then my phone started lighting up. First came the text from my mom. "What is this supposed to be, Lauren?" Then another. "We need to talk right now, answer your phone." A call came in, and I watched her name flash across my screen while I sat in my parked car, keys still in the ignition. I let it go to voicemail. If I picked up now, she'd scream, cry, twist my words, and I'd cave. So instead, I checked my email. My brother had replied all. "You seriously just blasted our private family finances to everyone? What is wrong with you? You're making yourself look crazy. If you had a problem, you should have come to us like an adult instead of staging some dramatic mic drop moment." It was almost funny. I had spent 3 years coming to them quietly, asking them to take over one bill at a time, only to hear, "We're trying," and "You make more money than we do." I'd been an adult. They'd been toddlers with credit cards. I was still staring at his message when a new reply popped in, from my aunt. "I had no idea you were paying for all of this, Lauren. Is this true?" I answered her, not them. "Yes. Every line in that email is backed by documents and statements. I can share them with you if you'd like." My aunt responded, "You don't have to. I believe you. I'm so sorry you've been carrying this alone." Another crack in their perfect narrative. My mom finally sent a long email back, 3 paragraphs of anger and guilt-tripping. She said I was humiliating the family, that I owed them because they raised me, that she never asked me to do any of this, conveniently forgetting the late-night sobbing calls about losing the house. Then she wrote the line that would change everything. "If you stop paying, everything will collapse. Is that what you want? To watch your own family be homeless?" I stared at that sentence, the emotional blackmail laid out in black and white. For once she'd said the quiet part loud. I forwarded her response to myself, saved it, and then replied, "I don't want anyone to be homeless. That's why I gave you 3 weeks' notice before the payments stop. You are adults. You have jobs. You have options. I am not one of them anymore." I ended with, "If you'd like to have an actual conversation about this, I'm open to a calm call this weekend, but I will not respond to yelling, name-calling, or threats." Then I put my phone on Do Not Disturb. If you saw that message from your own mother, telling you she will collapse without your money, would you keep paying, or finally let her face reality? Because I had just chosen reality. Silence didn't last. By the next morning, my mom had switched strategies, from private guilt to public pity. A coworker texted me a screenshot of my mom's Facebook post. "Nothing hurts more than when your own child turns their back on you after everything you've done for them." Some people forget who changed their diapers and fed them growing up. Money changes people. The comments poured in. "Kids these days have no respect. So sorry you're going through this, Brenda." I should have expected it. My mom had always been good at playing the martyr. What she didn't expect was that Chloe would see my email before seeing her post. Chloe commented, "Aunt Brenda, I love you, but this isn't the full story. I think it's better if everyone stays out of this until you and Lauren work it out privately." That alone shifted the tone. Another cousin liked Chloe's comment. Then my aunt messaged me privately. "She's posting about you. I'm sorry. Do you want me to say something?" I told her no. I wasn't going to fight a Facebook war. I had something stronger than a vague kids these days rant: the power to stop making payments. 3 days later, it started. My brother texted, "Hey, did the car note not go through? The bank is saying we're past due." I replied calmly, "As I wrote in the email, the auto payments ended yesterday. The account is in your name. You'll need to call them." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. A few hours later. "This is messed up. I can't cover this right now. You know that." I set my phone down, took a deep breath, and didn't answer. The next morning, he wrote again. "They're talking about repossession if we don't catch up. Is this seriously what you want?" I typed and erased 3 different replies before settling on the truth. What I want is to stop being responsible for bills I don't own, for people who call me broke while living off my paycheck. Then I put my phone down and went to work. At the hospital, a patient's monitor beeped. A doctor called my name. And for a few blessed hours, my entire brain belonged to the job. On my lunch break, I checked my email and saw a new message from the mortgage company addressed to my mom and CC'd to me. "Your automatic payment has been canceled at your request. Your next payment is due on." My mom replied to the bank, looping me back in. "This must be a mistake. My daughter takes care of this." I didn't respond there. I called the bank directly, confirmed that everything was set just as I'd arranged, and asked them to note in the account that I would not be resuming payments. When I hung up, my hands were shaking, but this time from something closer to relief. That night, my mom called 10 times in a row. Voicemail after voicemail poured in, crying, yelling, begging, threatening. "I can't believe you're doing this to us. What did we ever do to you? Do you want your father to die worrying about money?" At the end of the last one, her voice dropped to a cold, hard edge. "If you let this house go, don't you ever show your face here again." That hurt, more than I wanted to admit. But here's the thing. I hadn't let the house go. I'd given them notice, time, and all the information they needed. It wasn't that they couldn't handle the payments. It was that they didn't want to. They wanted me to keep bleeding quietly. A week later, when the mortgage went unpaid and the late notice hit, my mom finally texted, "Fine, come over this weekend, we'll talk." No apology, no recognition, just a command. Like I was still a kid being called to the principal's office. I almost said no, but a part of me needed to see them confronted with the reality they'd always pushed onto me. So I booked a flight home, this time on points I'd saved, not money I didn't have. The girl they once called broke was about to walk into the house she paid for and watch what happened when the safety net disappeared. When I pulled into the driveway that Saturday, the house looked the same. Trimmed hedges, wreath on the door, "Bless this home" sign still hanging crookedly on the porch. You'd never guess there was a past due notice sitting on the kitchen counter. My mom opened the door before I could knock. Her eyes were red from crying, but her jaw was set. My brother leaned against the hallway wall, arms folded, wearing that same smirk from the dinner, but this time there was panic behind it. We sat at the dining table, the same place she'd called me broke. No food, no small talk. Just a stack of papers in the middle. The printed version of my email, the late notice from the bank, and a yellow legal pad with numbers scribbled across it. "So," my mom started, voice brittle, "you've made your point." That sentence told me everything I needed to know. In her mind, this was a tantrum I'd thrown, not a boundary I'd set. "This isn't about making a point," I said calmly. "It's about making a change. I can't keep doing this." My brother jumped in. You're acting like we're just sitting around doing nothing. We work. We're trying. You could have eased us into this instead of ripping the rug out from under us. I gestured toward the papers. 3 weeks' notice is not ripping the rug out. 3 years of me paying everything while being told I'm a nobody. That was the rug. This is me stepping off it. My mom's eyes flashed. You think you're better than us now because you have a degree and a job in the city? We gave you everything. We sacrificed for you. I felt the familiar sting of guilt rise up. But I didn't let it take over this time. You gave me food and shelter because that's what parents do. I'm grateful for that. But that doesn't mean I owe you my entire adulthood in return. I slid a folder across the table. Inside were 2 things: a simple budget I'd printed from an online template, and a list of financial counseling services in their town. Here's the deal, I said. The bank gave you the option to refinance without me. It's in that letter. You can downsize, you can sell the cars, you can cut the extras. You have options. What you don't have anymore is me as your silent bank. My brother scoffed. So that's it? After everything, you're just walking away? No, I said quietly. I'm finally walking toward my own life. The room went quiet. My mom's eyes filled with tears, but they were angry tears, not remorseful ones. How can you be so cold? She whispered. You want us to suffer. I don't want you to suffer, I answered. I want you to grow up. I knew that was the line that would cut. It did. She slammed her hand on the table. Get out. For a second, my old self tried to surface, the one who would have apologized, begged, promised to cover. Just 1 more month. Instead, I stood up. Before I leave, I want to say one thing, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. You called me broke in this house. You laughed at me. You made me feel small. But the truth is, you were terrified of what would happen if I ever realized my worth. This, I gestured around the room, is what happens when I stop pretending you're right about me. I turned to my brother. You once told me I'd always be a nobody. But if I'm such a nobody, why does everything fall apart the second I stop paying? He looked away. No smirk now, just tight lips and tapping fingers. If you ever want to have a relationship with me that isn't built on money and manipulation, I added, my door is open. But it will not look like this. Then I walked out of my own house like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. Standing on the porch, I felt strangely light. Scared, yes. Sad, absolutely. But under all of that was something new. Respect for myself. If your family told you to get out of a house you paid for, would you crumble? Or finally believe you deserve better? 3 months later, I stood in a different doorway, holding keys that finally opened something with only my name on it. It wasn't a big place, just a small condo on the edge of the city with scuffed floors and outdated cabinets. But it was mine. No hidden second family attached. No secret auto payments. My credit score had already started to climb as the debt tied to my parents' life stopped draining me. I'd redirected the money I used to send them into a savings account and a retirement plan. For the first time, my future wasn't an afterthought. The fallout back home had been brutal. My aunt kept me updated in small, careful doses. My parents tried to refinance without my income and were denied. They listed the house, and when it finally sold, they had to downsize into a small rental apartment, about the size of my old place. My brother sold one of the cars and picked up night shifts at a warehouse to cover his other bills. There were angry texts in the beginning, blaming me for everything. We had to move because of you. You ruined our lives. I didn't respond to those. Then, slowly, the tone started to change. One day, a simple message from my brother. I got another job. It sucks, but I'm paying my own way now. Weeks later, from my mom. We're settling in. It's different. No apology yet, But no more posts about ungrateful children either. One night, after a long shift, I sat on my new couch, scrolling on my phone, and stumbled into a thread about financial abuse. Person after person wrote about paying their parents' bills, being called ungrateful, being guilt-tripped into staying broke so their family could flex. My chest tightened. For the first time, I put my own story into words, not naming names, not exposing identities, just describing what it felt like to be mocked by people whose lives you quietly funded. The responses were overwhelming. This is my life. I thought I was the only one. Your sentence about the only reason they can afford to look down on you is you just punched me in the chest. That's when I realized the email that blew up my family didn't just change my bank accounts. It changed how I showed up in the world. I stopped apologizing for having boundaries. I stopped equating love with sacrifice. And I started asking myself a question nobody in my family had ever asked me. What do you want? I wanted time, so I dropped one extra monthly shift. I wanted growth, so I signed up for an online class in nurse leadership, something I'd always told myself I didn't have time or money for. I wanted peace. So I stayed no contact with my parents for a while, letting the noise settle. Months later, my phone buzzed with a number I knew by heart but hadn't seen in a long time. My mom. I stared at the screen, feeling my heart slam against my ribs. This time, I picked up. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. "Hi," she said. I, um, I saw that thing you wrote online about families and money. Was that about us?" I didn't lie. "Yeah," I said quietly. "It was." There was a long pause. "I didn't realize how much we were asking of you," she finally admitted. "I was so scared of losing everything that I made you responsible for my fear. And then I punished you for it." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was the first time she'd ever taken any responsibility. "I'm not calling to ask for money," she added quickly. "I know that's over. I miss my daughter." Tears burned my eyes. "I miss my mom too," I said, "but the version of her that loved me more than she loved what I could pay for." We agreed to try something new. Conversations that didn't end in, "Can you cover this?" Calls where I wasn't treated like a walking debit card. We're still figuring it out. Some days it feels possible. Some days, old habits slip in, and I have to remind her, and myself, of the boundary. And that's the real revenge, I think. Not watching them struggle or move into a smaller place. Not the cars being sold or the vacations disappearing. The real revenge is reclaiming my life and forcing them to confront the truth. I was never the broke one. I was the one keeping everything from breaking. If you're watching this and you're the responsible one in your family, the one they call when a bill is late, when a car breaks down, when a bad decision finally comes due, ask yourself, are you helping or are you being used? Are you saving them or are you sacrificing yourself? And if your own mother mocked you for being a nobody while living in a house you paid for, what would you do? Would you keep the peace and keep paying, or would you send the email that finally sets you free? Tell me honestly, if you were in my place, what would you have done differently? And at what point would you have walked away? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to see how many of us are done being broke nobodies in families that can't survive without us. Thank you for listening. From my perspective, Lauren isn't cold or selfish at all. She's someone who finally realized her worth after years of being emotionally and financially drained. It takes a lot of courage to stop confusing love with sacrifice and to choose education, self-respect, and a healthier future instead of constant guilt. If you were in Lauren's place, would you keep paying for your family's lifestyle, or would you cut them off and start rebuilding your own life? And why?